So autism, what is it, what causes it, and how does it affect a child's life? So today we're going to go over all of this and bust some of the common myths. So tell me, Adele, what is autism? Let's start there.
All right, autism is, well, in my view, a very interesting neurodevelopmental condition. It's a child normally has deficits or differences in two areas of their development. The biggest difference is difficulties with what we call social communication. So that's essentially understanding another person, being able to interact back and forth, with the other person. The ability to understand non-verbal language, understanding body language, being able to make eye contact with the other person, and sharing emotions and experiences with the other person. People with autism also struggle making and maintaining relationships. So that's the biggest difficulties that children with autism face, is the social communication difficulties. The other area that children struggle with, the other part of the diagnosis, would be what we call a child having restricted interest or showing some stereotypical behaviours. So that's children that have a very narrow focus of things that they are interested in, and they would want to do things in a certain way. If it doesn't happen in that certain way, they would feel very upset by it. So the children are often stuck in a certain routine. If you travel to school normally via this road and you all of a sudden go via the other road, that could lead to a meltdown. Or if the bread is normally cut in squares and this time it's in triangles, that might just upset a child with autism a lot. So it's stuck in a certain way of doing things. Children often have strong interests in certain areas. So common topics are dinosaurs, sharks, Pokemon, those type of interests.
And obsessed with that.
Being obsessed with it and really experts in their field in that specific area.
They know every name of every dinosaur ever born.
Exactly. And then some children have what we call stereotypical behaviour. So that could be unusual movements such as hand flapping or rocking, back and forth.
Vocal tics.
Or tics, sometimes difficult to distinguish, but it can vocal tics can be a part of it. Or children, instead of playing with toys, they would line the toys up or arrange them in colour groups, or some sort of pattern that's of interest to them. So that's in a long nutshell.
Yeah, because a lot of things you're saying, me as a parent, I'm like, oh my gosh, there's a few things that happen here that my child's been like, because we've all had that 2-year-old that if you don't get the blue spoon, the blue cup and the blue bowl and put the Wheat Bix, then the milk and then the honey, all hell breaks loose. But obviously that's just sometimes just a childhood thing. So realistically, it's just that next level, I guess, of that it's because when do you usually diagnose a child with autism? How old are they?
So the age can vary greatly, from say when a child's 2 years old up to adulthood. You can diagnose autism as an adult. Some children would slip through, but I think going back to what you've said, we've probably all got some autistic features. So we've all got our way of doing things, because sometimes doing things in a certain way gives us comfort, and it helps us to treat our own anxieties and to reduce stresses in our life. So we do, most of us do have certain rituals, and that does give us comfort. So I
have no idea what you're talking about.
we can
all relate to some of that.
Tick a few boxes for everyone.
Absolutely. So often when we talk about ADHD and autism, things like that, it's looked at as negative. So tell me some of the positive things about a child or an adult diagnosed with autism. Because children going into their adulthood often fixate or have a very strong interest in one or two areas. People that are on the higher side of the autistic spectrum can
often become experts in their field. So that's people that would research a topic into more depth than any other person would be able to, or doing one thing over and over and over again, such as, playing music, so some of these really talented musicians that have amazing, abilities often have some autistic features because they're happy to do that for really long times.
Yeah, hours on end.
Hours on end. So, and that goes for, for a variety of occupations. So if it's something that involves repetitive work, it can be a strength for some people
with autism.
Yeah.
So what are the challenging things then? Because obviously, a lot of it is what?
Yeah. Autism, I think in general, it is more challenging than than the positives that I've just described, because things need to often happen in a certain way or in a certain routine. Children can have meltdowns if things don't happen that way. So, and that most people's family lives are not that structured. So we don't always have breakfast.
And sometimes there's a detour on the road. Nothing much you can do about it.
We don't always have breakfast at 6:35, and so that type of things can unsettle children. But I think the biggest challenges for children with autism is, again, the social interaction difficulties. So children can struggle understanding other kids at school, which means they struggle making friends. They can feel lonely. They can struggle with working in group settings, and just generally struggle understanding other people's social cues and meaning. So
because obviously we've all watched whatever that show is with Sheldon.
Sheldon Cooper.
Yeah. But not all people have that inability with the social cues, because there's different levels and different it's not all people with autism are the same. No.
And I mean, that is probably the issue around the myths around autism. Not all children are the same. So if your neighbour's son had these issues and was doing things in such a way, it doesn't mean that another child that have maybe some stereotypical behaviour has autism. Not everyone that's got certain features would be end up with an autism diagnosis. We've all seen Rain Man as well. That's the other common quote that or example that gets mentioned. No, not everyone looks like Rain Man, and because they don't do things exactly or not exactly the same doesn't mean they have or does not have autism. It's quite hard to diagnose.
Yeah, so interesting. So what are some of the myths then around people with autism and children with autism?
Some of the other myths that I haven't mentioned about children, because they do struggle with social interactions and often are happy with their own company, doesn't mean that they're not interested in other people. They can be very interested. They just struggle relating. So they often want to make friends. So it's not as if they, just want to spend time on their own.
And they're never going to get married and never have children themselves.
Yeah, no, that's absolutely not true.
No, exactly.
A lot of people, so especially children or adults, people that are on the higher end of the spectrum can lead very productive, near normal lives if it's not as severe, if they're not severely affected.
So there's surely some other myths as well.
Yeah. In the common media, you would often hear this myth that autism is caused by measles or MMR vaccines. That's absolutely not true. I think one of the reasons that that link have been thought of is because that's normally the age where parents realize that their child have difficulties, and it coincidentally coincides with the time that you give that vaccination. But normally by that age, people start realizing my child's maybe not, talking to me in the same way that, the brother or the sister did, or so forth. So that's a very common myth, and it's not true.
So if there was one wish about about autism, and what would you wish that people understood about autism?
Yeah, autism is a very wide spectrum of difficulties or differences that children can present with. It is sometimes quite hard to diagnose. A lot of the features overlap with other neurodevelopmental difficulties, or even with just normal quirky behavior that a child might have. For example, one of the biggest things that we see is children that actually have ADHD and struggle keeping attention to a conversation, also can come across as autistic, because they don't read social cues, because they just can't pay attention to what you're saying. They get into your personal space. They struggle making and maintaining friends because they blurt something out before they've had 2 seconds to think about it. So a lot of children with conditions such as ADHD also has sensory processing difficulties, which means that, and that is a common feature in children with autism as well. So that's one of the, the biggest things that we find is that people misinterpret signs of attention difficulties with autism. It's quite hard to diagnose. We normally would get at least an occupational therapist and speech therapist assessment, try and get all the reports together and to interpret whether that child fits into, have ticked all the boxes, so to speak. And occasionally, even after all of that, we might have to send the child for even more testing, so it's not a straightforward process to make a diagnosis. And it's really hard for the majority of parents to live with a child that have autistic spectrum disorder. It's
not an easy one.
Not always easy. No.
So what about any advice then for people watching that has a child in their life, whether it's their neighbour or it's their own child? Any advice for them?
So children with autism are slightly different from other children, but in life people are just different. Everyone, no two people are the same. So that child will certainly have some strengths as well, and you can use that strengths to
just to focus on those realistically.
To focus on those, and that's probably the biggest.
If they love Pokemon, you just learn about Pokemon. All right, talk about Pokemon.
Work with that, and you can build on skills. So the other bit of advice is I often tell parents that autism, social communication difficulties is a little bit like a language. If you learn, and for some of us it comes naturally, we can, some people can speak 10 languages quite easily, others struggle learning a new language. And I compare it to that. I say, if with practice and lots of repetition, you can often learn some of those social skills that doesn't come naturally to a child with autism. So early therapy, early intervention have definitely shown to make a difference in the outcome.
So as you can see, autism is common and there are quite a few myths surrounding it. And while many of them seem convincing, don't be fooled. If you have any questions or concerns, always speak to an expert. So if you've got any concerns around your child and whether they're on the spectrum at all, ask your doctor to refer you to the team here at Townsville Pediatrics, because they'd be happy to help you.